Hello, welcome. This is Roger Royse with Silicon Valley Impact on TAL Radio, where we bring you each week interview or a discussion with somebody in the Silicon Valley or anywhere in the world that is having a major impact through the use of their business and technology. And today we're talking to Dennis Donohue. He's the executive director of the Western Growers Center for Innovation and Technology in Salinas, California. Dennis has been a grower shipper himself and a producer for more than 30 years. He's previously the mayor of Salinas as well. So he certainly has a lot of background in the area. And I think you're going to be really interested to hear what Dennis has done and created down in that part of the world. So first of all, Dennis, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the invitation. We former mayors never tire of talking about things they're passionate about, and ag tech and Salinas's role in the development of that ecosystem is something we're awfully proud of. But I think the most important thing is, and I'm real excited for the opportunity I've had to be involved with Western Growers now, 6 years now almost. One of the things you learn, and I know you have a lot of experience with this yourself, success or progress, it's a team sport. So we think we brought some elements together here uniquely in Salinas, through City Hall, through the industry, Western Growers, but nothing happens without a lot of people working together.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a lot about the Western Growers Center for Innovation. It's really a model, I think, of how to just completely build a community around startup innovation based on the tools that are available in your community. But before we jump into what you've been doing, I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about the origin story. Because as I remember this all started, it's almost 10 years ago when you were mayor. And Salinas, for those of you out in radio land that don't know, Salinas, I think they call it, the salad bowl of America?
Don't limit us to America. We are the salad bowl of the world.
The salad bowl of the world.
The salad, well, put on my mayor's hat, that evolved to we're the fresh nerve center of the planet. And by that, I mean, and it's interesting, and you know this because you're around the ag ecosystem, is, I think it's really important to kind of establish your lane and where you really do fit. That benefits everybody the most, to be very, very clear. And the reality is Salinas really is really unique intersection of the fresh world. But believe me, representing Western Growers, when I wander over into the other valley, because we represent essentially the specialty crop crowd, which is fresh fruits, vegetables, and nuts, and collectively our membership is responsible, depending upon the crop time of year, but on average between 50 to 60% of North America's fresh fruit and vegetable and nut production. So it's a pretty big platform. And the Central Valley is a different ballgame than Salinas and the Central Coast. So our calling card is fresh. We're not the permanent crop crowd. We wander over to the Central Valley and that type of thing. So it's important to make that distinction. But what we tried to do, and it really goes back to November 2007, and I ran for mayor on the standpoint that, Salinas at the time, had structural budget deficits, was a relatively poor city in terms of municipal resources, rich in talent. And as I like to tell people, Salinas has 12 zip codes. Unfortunately, only 6 of them were in city limits. If I could have gotten my hands on the other 6, we would have had a lot of resources. So I kept thinking about, all right, we're going to need a growth strategy for the community because it's a city of young people. So what happens if we rub the two sticks together of the freshest valley of the planet with the most innovative valley on the planet, the Silicon Valley, which is right up north, and what do you get? So November of 2007, we convened really what was essentially the first agtech summit. And what I tell people was what we did, I think, was we began to lay the groundwork for the agtech ecosystem, because innovation is not anything new to ag. You know that growing up from your ag has been innovating for a long time. But I think what we did do, we kind of called out this, let's bring ag and technology together by name. And we were fortunate that we had a couple of platforms to work with because I was in City Hall. And trust me, as a grower shipper, I mean, I was the radicchio guy. The radicchio guy's ability to convene is a lot different than lettuce or broccoli. So I was a smaller player, but had been in the industry a long time. But we were fortunate that the The industry responded positively to the idea of supporting the community and economic development. And during my time in office, we were able to bring together Bruce Taylor, who obviously a recognized leader in the industry, a known innovator, but also very, very committed to
From Taylor Farms.
Yeah, and very committed to this community, coupled with we brought in John Hartnett from the Silicon Valley and his Irish Leadership Technology Group. Now, I always tell people it just happened to be a coincidence. We both had an Irish last name, but he and I got to know each other from through my political mentor, Tom McHenry, and I happened to go to John, and because I observed he had really built a tremendous global network. And so what happened was we really had a convergence, platforms and resources and a thought. What happens if we really rub those sticks together, the Salinas Valley and the Silicon Valley? And then Bruce was also chairing the Western Growers Association at the time. So it was much more than, hey, here's a couple of folks with an idea, which is a good thing, and that's how things can happen. But it was really the convergence, leadership, organizations, resources, and a commitment to make something happen. And I think that really accelerated the process. And I think that's what made it unique. And as I tell people, we're housed in Salinas, gateway to, gateway from the Silicon Valley, but we're for our entire network. And then, as you know, as the years have gone on, ag tech is now a global game. So the reality is, if you're really immersed into ag tech, I mean, you can choose the countries. You're hanging out with the Dutch, you're hanging out with the Israelis, you're with New Zealand, Singapore, et cetera. So then it becomes important in that type of environment to really establish your lane. And so what I tell people is our value proposition is market access. We don't necessarily have a monopoly on that, of course, but we're uniquely positioned because of the nature of our board, and we're able to help create market access, provide business services, and then I think really do networking in a unique fashion and really bring growers together, which is ultimately what folks are looking for potential customers, potential folks to co-develop products with. So I think it's been a good formula. It's evolving, of course, because I think ag tech has evolved and it's maturing. So we're trying to get really focused more and more, what do we do best? We think market access is a big part of that.
Yeah, and that's the brilliance of the idea. As you said, Dennis, 50-60% of the nation's produce is a huge production area, as well as being known for all the other things. I know it's got a big tourist industry, but agriculture is number one. And here it sits very close to Silicon Valley. And I know your idea was, why can't we build a bridge between these two valleys? And it sounds like you've certainly done that with the Center for Innovation. You've now got tech companies sitting out there close to their markets, where they have to be in ag tech, right? They need to be close to the markets just for market validation, if nothing else.
Well, at the end of the day, the ag community is the best situated to create wholesale access to prospective customer base. And I'm very clear with folks, look, we're the specialty crop crowd. The Midwest has huge players. We're not row crops. We know those folks. We can make some connections. So we do. And again, technology is not new to agriculture. Innovation is not new to agriculture. But I think what is a little bit new, and this as an investor, is we've tried to create more critical mass around specialty crop ag, because California.
Can I stop you? Can you define that for folks?
Well, I was just going to say, it fundamentally is fresh fruits, vegetables, and nuts. The other element is, we would say it's those crops that are not subsidized. I mean, the economics, the go-to-markets are completely different than, let's say, the Midwest, which may have price supports, subsidies, et cetera. All fine. I'm not passing judgment on it. It just simply, it's a different business model in terms of production ag. So we're, again, the description of fresh fruits, vegetables, and nuts. Basically, all the players in the game is you pays your money and you take your chance. So it's a little bit like panning for gold. You put money in the ground or in the orchard and you see how you do. And but it's awfully fragmented. And so from that standpoint, as you know, technology often needs scale. It needs critical mass to attract the attention of the major players. So part of what we've been trying to do and working to do more earnestly and intentionally is aggregate the entire specialty crop in certain strategic areas, whether it's food safety, automation, even data, because if you just take, break things down crop by crop, it's not necessarily big enough to attract the attention of, let's say, the major technology players, which is not to say it can't attract the attention of technology, but at the end of the day, what we're finding is that we want to create market access for lack of a better phrase, general discovery, but on certain strategic initiatives. For instance, and it's almost a year ago today, and we'll be updating it at the World Ag Expo in Tulare in a couple of weeks. We launched a global harvest automation around fresh harvest. So for instance, if you're a tomato that's going to end up in a bottle of ketchup, it doesn't matter if you get whacked around a little bit. But if you need to be place packed and you're off to retail, or you're going to be a nicely sliced tomato in Burger King or wherever, that's a more labor intensive process. Strawberry is more labor intensive. Lettuce, if you're going to be 24 count. This issue of the labor intensive harvesting deal, we've recognized that we have to aggregate.
What's interesting about this, you mentioned that this is a global sort of thing now. And really what you're doing is you're finding local solutions to global problems out there in the field, being right there, boots on the ground. And some of these solutions, in fact, all of them probably have worldwide application in solving our worldwide food security issues, how they really made agriculture a more efficient process and wide application around the world, again, solving our food insecurity issues. Can you talk about a few examples?
Well, a couple things. It is a global conversation right now in terms of this whole issue of everybody's trying to address the labor issue or lack thereof. With aging workforces, a variety of other reasons, it's becoming increasingly difficult to find labor for these jobs. It is a global conversation. So as we look at automation, kind of use a Star Wars analogy, and if you look at the marketplace, R2D2, things like automated thinning and weeding, those are essentially repetitive processes, and we're seeing good progress there. Though when you get into fresh field harvest, now you're talking about replicating a human being. So that's CP3O. That is a way more complicated deal, which is why we feel like we've had to begin to strategically organize, and we deliberately called it a global harvest automation initiative for a couple of reasons. Frankly, other parts of the world have had these challenges ahead of us. Our role is to find solutions for our members, so we've cast our net throughout the entire planet. Okay, who's doing what? And so we're looking at companies all over the world on this harvest space. But for instance, take companies. One of the companies in the center is FarmWise, that is doing automated weeding. Time Magazine has pegged them as a product of the year a couple of times in the last couple of years, and they're making good, strong progress in the thinning and weeding space. Bear Flag Robotics, which is a company we're really proud of, they did a fabulous job. Gino and Aubrey, two very, very talented folks. We're glad to have been part of their story.
That's great. They just got acquired.
They just got acquired by John Deere, and we're really pleased for them. And you're starting to see, and John Deere historically, I think most people would agree, has been more focused on the Midwest. So we think for our members, that's a really exciting development to see more, really serious interest in the specialty crop world, see where that goes. The automation piece, we launched this Global Harvest Automation Initiative in Tulare last year. We actually launched it with 6 or 7 different countries. We're looking at startups all over the world, and we're also looking at being proactive. If I can make a computer analogy, just like there's DOS and the industry settled on a standard, we're taking a look at that concept along with looking at various startups and how can we create either market access or accelerate, because we know we really now view this labor issue as a race against time. So the automation space is a really interesting one. But the other thing is, it is in the end about where you have to save labor. So another company that's affiliated with the center that we're proud of is the Burrow, which is a harvest aid concept, where if you look at the table grape industry, they're not actually doing the actual clipping the grape from the vines, but if you can save that back and forth from the inside of the orchard to the side, and then back and forth and give back, let's say 20% of the time, that helps contribute, because this is going to be a process and an evolution. But Those are some examples of some companies in the automation space. And frankly, they set up, we're involved in a project with Karen Ross, the California Secretary, Department of Food and Ag, about moving throughout the state for a year and talking about the skills that are going to be required for the next generation. When you think about ag, you don't necessarily start with AI and robotics and that automation, but we're heading to a different world. And, STEM skills are going to be increasingly, if you get into software services, the whole data play. I mean, another company affiliated with the center, Pago, provides a whole array of payroll services. So there's also those types of products in terms of making organizations more efficient. And then there's also just kind of general discovery. A company I really like is AgVoice Global, which is a voice to text program that if you need to be able to work hands-free, or, if you think about ag, there are a lot of very, very sharp people in the field, in the orchards, vineyards, et cetera, very sharp, very experienced. They may or may not know how to read or write or speak English, but they can talk. And if you can talk and you can get something to text, that's going to be invaluable. Ask me what the priorities of our industry are. We're going to talk about food safety. We're going to talk about automation. We're going to talk about the need for precision ag. And so no one's necessarily going to say, give me voice to text. But when you see that, you go, well, that can be helpful because, at the end of the day, you and I can have a conversation about ag tech all day long, but who's going to do this stuff? So we really have to think about that, because I think one of the things that's really important when we think through this issue of, how long things take is, what's involved in adoption. And, anyone in ag will tell you that there can be cultural issues. You've got to get the workforce behind it. It's got to work in the field. It's got to work on a real practical basis. So, there's technology, all the other aspects of ag that just make unique industry.
Yeah, the robotics aspect is really fascinating, the advances being made. And you touched on something that I hadn't thought of until you mentioned it, but just the labor issue, because that's not just a California issue, is it? It's a worldwide issue.
It is absolutely a global conversation. It is all over the planet. Everybody is dealing with it. And I think this is encouraging. It's probably painful. But for instance, since we get to hang around the world, I affectionately call them the Brits. The Brits, regardless of, I don't do politics, I just kind of do declarative, well, maybe I do. If you're in the UK, you've had to deal with Brexit, you've had to deal with COVID. It's interesting to note the timing, and perhaps not so coincident that, they've always been very progressive on the robotics side. I mean, there's some great players over there, but, you're starting to really hear some acceleration of some technologies moving forward, in terms of lettuce and broccoli, kind of that proverbial necessity is the mother of invention, and it's really starting to accelerate some things.
So what is being accelerated? What's the future look like? I mean, especially after COVID, I mean, I bet it's changed maybe some of the focus. I mean, there's a lot more farm to table now than there used to be, I think. A lot more home delivery.
That's interesting. And I completely agree with you. I mean, if you think back, one of the things that kind of emerged in terms of supply chain disruption was kind of this emergence of non-traditional supply chain players. But like anything else, and I'm not smart enough to know the answer to the question, a lot of the players that emerged were community-based and startup-based. Do I think demand goes away for that type of service and product? Probably not. Who the players are and how that's going to evolve, we'll see. But I think that's probably going to be a residual of COVID. The supply chain, and obviously we're going through some tough supply chain issues right now for a variety of reasons. But, I think the alteration of the supply chain, home delivery, that sort of thing, I think most people would think that's going to stick. Do we know the players? Probably not. But I would guess it would shift more toward the private sector, as much as we all cheer for, community-based groups. Sometimes that can be tougher to do, in terms of, where you get your labor and funding and that sort of thing. But you're right. I mean, I think that's been a reality. I think this automation thing is going to accelerate. And, one of the things we tell people, look, we're not talking about getting rid of jobs. What we're talking about is better jobs, higher paying jobs, more skills required. But I can tell you, from moving around this state, the help wanted issue is very, very real. And everyone really says, there was kind of the initial first summer of COVID, but, we're 2 summers in, and I think people really do view this as much more of a seminal change, and there's going to be a real competition for skilled labor. And so I don't think anyone has the luxury of assuming folks will be available. I think you have to get ready for that. And I think we're seeing all over the world. So I do expect to see a pickup in those types of products. But what's interesting is, for all intents and purposes, you've seen, you do see some commercial activity on automated thinning, automated weeding. You're starting to see more automated, targeted spraying, those types of things. The commercial harvest piece from an automation standpoint, there's nothing measurable to report at this, so there's still a lot of work to be done. And it's not going to be a matter of just technology. It's also going to be a matter of, are the cost right? What is the service like? So I think that whole thing is in formation, but it is really a critical need. So I expect this automation thing to remain front and center. Food safety, we're taking a look at launching an initiative where we're focused on rapid diagnostics. And if you think about it, I mean, that's the world we live in now. People want information that's critical to health, SAP, but on the other hand, our industry has really, kind of the same thing. How big is that market compared to, let's say, the COVID market?
So, and that would be like, for example, a handheld device that can tell you if there's pathogens or something in the produce.
My guess is we're certainly heading towards, we want that type of information as soon as possible. Obviously, what we're looking for is, can we cut the testing time where we have to wait to get information from 18 hours to 5 or 6? Can we detect a problem just as it occurs so we can either mitigate it or prevent it? So we're focusing on diagnostics. We obviously have an interest in the prevention side, and the traceability side involves the entire supply chain to some degree. We're still very focused on how do you really get the full possibilities of technology leveraged on just kind of the key existential issues, safety, labor, et cetera.
All right. Well, Dennis, that's Dennis's predictions for the future as to what's going to continue to be hot. I want to thank you for being here. This is Roger Royse, Silicon Valley Impact on TAL Radio. We've been talking with Dennis Donohue, Executive Director of the Western Growers Center for Innovation and Technology, about agtech, about the startup community and technology community that's been created down in Salinas, and about some of the technologies that are being developed in Salinas that have worldwide application. So again, thanks for being here, Dennis. And Roger Royse, Silicon Valley Impact. We'll see you next time.